I call the Tuesday, October 13th, 2020 meeting of the Huron Board of Education to order. I would ask Mr. Christopherson to note the roll call, and we would note that Mr. Van Berkom and Ms. Simmonsma are on telephone today.
I don't have her yet.
Oh, we don't have her yet. We're trying to grab her. Okay. With that, I guess I would ask everybody to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we had new agendas placed before us tonight. We have 4 additional hires, 1 additional resignation, an additional report to the board. And with that, I guess I would ask for an approval of the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, we will vote, and I would ask Mr. Christopherson to please call roll.
Let's see. Lee,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye.
Van Berkom. Aye. And Bishop.
Aye.
Passed unanimously.
All right, the agenda is adopted. Moving into dates to remember, November 4th is an early release date. November 11th is Veterans Day holiday. November 25th is an early release date. And November 26th and 27th is our holiday break. There's no schools that day. Item 6 is community input on items not on the agenda. Is anybody here with community input on items not on the agenda? Seeing nobody come forward, item 7 is conflict disclosure and consideration of waivers. We have no items to consider there. So we will move into item 8, which is our consent agenda. Superintendent of Schools recommends approval of the following. Item A is approval and/or correction of minutes of previous meetings. Item B, consideration and approval of bills. Item C is approval and/or correction of the financial report. Item D is board approval of new hires. As was mentioned previously, classified personnel, substitute teachers, classroom aides, and volunteers must be approved in order to be covered by our workers' compensation plan. We have Derek Schaefer, substitute teacher and substitute paraeducator. Darlene Gross, substitute teacher, substitute paraeducator. Emily Wenzel, a DLC para at Washington 4-5 Center. Taryn Kistner, DLC para at Huron High School. Taylor Stewart, a substitute teacher and a substitute paraeducator. Morgan Harrison, a substitute teacher, substitute paraeducator. Morgan Rathjen, a substitute teacher and substitute para. Nicole Gerber, substitute teacher, substitute para. Sheila Anderson, a substitute teacher and substitute para. Mark Harmon, a full-time grounds first call sub-custodian. Jody Rudebush, a substitute teacher, substitute paraeducator. Jean Couch, a on-call interpreter. Moses Aduato, a on-call interpreter. Stephen Johnson, a substitute bus driver. Item E is Iverson's sponsorship at Tiger Stadium. Item F is contracts for board approval. Item G, resignations for board approval. We have 2 of those. Lois Doris, food service, 10 years, and that's effective December 31st. Meredith Gubin, a Title I teacher, James Valley and Holy Trinity. And item H, that is our October 19th marching band fundraiser. The consent agenda may be approved with 1 motion. However, if a board member wishes to separate an item for discussion, he or she may do so. So we are seeking a motion to approve the consent as presented.
So moved. Sorry.
We have a motion and a second, and we do have somebody here that would like to make a comment on the consent agenda. So if you'd like to head to the microphone.
Mrs. Simmonsma has joined the meeting.
Okay, Mrs. Simmonsma is now here with us.
Hi, I was just wondering if you could table the custodial slash,
I think maybe our mic's not working.
sorry. I was just wondering if you could table the custodial slash grounds position, and unless I missed it, I don't think it was advertised as a custodial slash grounds position. Most of the processes were advertisement, doing application, screening, interviewing for it, reference checks before a final decision is made, and as far as I know, it wasn't listed unless I missed it somewhere.
All right, so you'd like us to table that. I guess getting in discussion, Kelly, could you go through the hiring process on that of how we got to where we're at now?
On that position, we were advertising for a custodian for the arena. And we had a pool of applicants. At the same time, we have a new director of buildings and grounds who was looking to fill a position, but we hadn't yet advertised that custodial position. So really, we had 2 custodial positions to fill. We had 2 applicants that fit the bill, and we filled both positions, which is a common practice in the district, to advertise for a para and hire several paras out of the pool, to advertise for a teacher and to fill several teaching positions. I would venture a guess that there are others on this consent agenda tonight that are the same situation. There are people being hired for jobs that happen to open up. At the same time, we were advertising for the same type of job, and the positions were filled. The school's attorney says there is no requirement to advertise for jobs, and that we most certainly had our bases covered when we advertised for a custodial position and hired 2 custodial positions. And in addition to that, you have the school board policy regarding this job that says the Board of Education reserves the right to deviate from the hiring schedule and policies of employment where they feel it is in the interest of the public school to do so. So I don't think we're violating any policy by filling a position that followed all the procedures Wayne has outlined. They were advertised, applications were received, they were screened, interviews were conducted, reference checks were completed.
Any board members have any comments or any direction on where you'd like to go on?
So just to make sure we're clear on it, it was advertised as an arena custodian. That's what showed up on whatever postings occurred, and we hired 2 custodians on that. This one here is listed as a first call sub-custodian. What is a first call sub-custodian?
They would cover any custodial absences before we went out looking for other substitutes, because we don't have hardly any. Really, 1 active substitute that wants to work limited hours is all we have. Or before we would have to look at cleaning services to fill in. So a first call substitute doesn't know what they're going to do maybe that day when they get there. If somebody calls in sick at the last meeting and they aren't already covering another custodian, they would go there. So this person is going to learn minimum of 5 buildings, day hours, night hours. He's going to do it all. And when he's not doing that, he would fill in on grounds help. And the trade-off against that is we would use less hours of temporary part-time help on the grounds and snow removal.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would just clarify that they're not grounds and getting paid to be sub-custodian. They will vacate their grounds duties to make sure that our custodial needs are met. So it's not, I just don't want to lay misinterpretation here, that is a position that will allow us to have buildings ready to go the next morning, because they'll vacate the grounds to do that.
Exactly.
So if I'm understanding the position correctly, the person's first job is to be a custodian to fill in where we need custodians. And if we don't need a sub-custodian that day, they're gonna do grounds work.
I'm going to be part of this, but I can tell you an exception to that, and so no, that would not be the correct interpretation. If we're in a snowstorm,
Yeah.
their first duty is not going to be sub-custodian.
Sure, okay.
Their first duty is going to be the greatest need
Gotcha.
that the director has,
Okay. So
which
it's,
at that point would be buildings and grounds.
but it's a full-time position, the
That's
person will
right.
be either doing custodial work or some
That's
grounds
right.
work. Okay.
And mainly the grounds part is on there because that would be summer duties. We don't need substitute custodians for the most part during the summer.
Okay. And is the pay that's listed, is that within the hiring schedule
Yes. For a groundskeeper,
or groundskeeper?
which is a little higher than some of the custodian jobs. And because of the duties of knowing all 5 buildings, we just went with the groundskeeper pay range. And we're not talking a lot of dollars of difference on that hiring schedule.
Mr. Chair, I'd also comment on that. All of the supervisors bring their people in, and then the experience, the board has one person, which is me, review the experience to make sure that it fits within the 5 years that they're allowed. Point for the community is that if they're allowed 0 years, they get an increment for 5 years to catch up to where they would have been, but if they bring in experience from other places, they can come in with those 5 years, and then they get cost of living like anyone else, just so that people know how it works.
Can I still add something, or is my time up? My only concern was that I knew 4 people that would be interested in this such position compared to what the arena was. The arena's a lot of weekends, and, you know, there's a fair amount of nights through that job, but this position, unless it's snow-related and they really needed it, it's primarily the sub work is only Monday through Friday. And, you know, if it's not snowing, I guess they probably just do the grounds work during the week. So I just knew that I had other people that I knew personally that would have been interested in something like that, but you did have at least a couple people to pick from. It just seemed like it was more of a point, someone is like appointed instead of selected from more people if it's like a new position, because I don't think we've had this actual position before. Technically,
Yes,
you know,
we've had
exactly
the-
like that.
Yes, we've had this position before. It's been a few years, but
Yeah.
we have been staffed like this. The directors that have come through over the years have deviated from that. Some preferred to have the full-time, four full-time positions. Some have tried to run with 3 full-time positions and use more part-time help.
Yeah, which I'm all for. I mean, it makes sense to do whatever you can to save money. It just, to my opinion, was it would be more fair to all the taxpayers if they had a shot at a position that makes up to $44,558 a year and a position that doesn't like require a master's degree or any degree, so. Yeah, that's all I had.
Any other comments? Board comments?
Mr. Chair, I do feel I'm obligated to give you one more. Once you get to the board level of approval, you have opened those people up to the community and jeopardized their previous jobs. So just so that you're aware that if you table that, there is a personnel consequence that's involved with that, just so that people are aware.
I was like, we advertised for a custodial job, and hired a person for a slightly different custodial job. I I think that we follow the procedures as we typically do. And so I don't know there's enough reason to, I mean, basically, it sounds like you're asking to table it, reopen it up for applicants, and then allow other people to apply for the job. I think if the administration has found a person who they think fits on the spot and they have them now, I don't think it would be good precedent for the board to start second guessing those decisions and saying, no, we want you to look at a larger applicant pool. So I would be in favor of proceeding with the hire today.
Yeah, I'm gonna follow Dave with that one. I think, we opened it, we had a hire, we had a pool of people. You know, there was more than just 2 people that were in that pool, so we've seen some qualified applicants, and it sounds like we've found multiple qualified applicants, so I'm good with the process. We do have support staff hiring schedule GDBA that says the Board of Education reserves the right to deviate from the hiring schedule and policies of employment in those instances where they feel it is in the interest of the Huron Public Schools to do so. So, you know, we went through the process, we found qualified people, and we're hiring them, so I don't feel like we're doing anything we shouldn't be doing.
And I guess I would point out, I don't know that, it sounds like we didn't even deviate from the hiring schedule or deviate from the policies of employment. It sounds like we followed the normal schedule, the experience was factored in to put them in the right level of the schedule, and so I don't know if that was a deviation from the policy. So.
Any other comments? If not, then I would ask Mr. Christopherson to call roll.
Simmonsma.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye.
Van Berkom.
Aye.
And Bischoff.
Aye.
Passed unanimously.
All right, consent agenda is approved. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Nebelsick as he celebrates the successes in our district.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to congratulate Cheech Harmon as an ESD All-Conference performance at the cross-country meet in Aberdeen. Cheech was 13th, and the top 15 are considered ESD All-Conference, so congratulations there. As we get towards the wrap-up of the fall seasons, which will begin now with us hosting state soccer this weekend. Cross-country is coming up. Cheer and dance is coming up. I just want to congratulate the students, the parents, the coaches for following all the protocols so kids could play games. That is huge after what we went through from March 13th to June, and I just congratulate a lot of people who've done everything they can so that children's youth was not lost in the middle of the pandemic. Those would be my main congratulations. I want to thank the Buchanan K-1 Center, would like to thank Walmart for their donation of school supplies to the district. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Nebelsick. Moving into reports to the board. Our first report is Mr. Radke with his good news report.
Good evening. Normally, Ms. Hines from Buchanan gives the report in October, but she called up and wanted to switch, and 2 of the items that I wanted to talk to you about just fit perfectly as they are very timely, starting with the completion of our building project. There's still little things that are being done to finish off the project, but for the most part, we are completed, and we were allowed to move in the Friday before school started. So that is the front of the building. Following the same facade as the other renovations of the elementaries and the new middle school, following the curvature of the front of the building. And I know that you guys have all been in the building, but for the community that's watching at home, this is the secure entrance we now have. People can come into the front lobby, and then there's a set of doors that allow into the commons for students, and a buzzer that would allow individuals to go into the office that they need to get buzzed into. This is a view from the commons. We have 1 large desk for 2 secretaries with space for a 3rd if we need that in the future as our enrollment grows. And you can see the nice blank wall in the background. I'm reminded weekly by some of our teachers that I need to get some decorations up there to show off our tiger spirit. This is our new conference room at the front of the building. Currently, we're using extra desks as meetings in this room are kept small to maintain our social distancing. But eventually, we'll be getting tables like we have in the IPC so we can adjust based on the needs of the room, whether it's a small parent meeting or if the student council is meeting in the room. In the nurse's office, one big need that we had that we didn't have in the other building was a dedicated restroom right off in the nurse's office, as well as a sink in her outer office so she could complete different cares for kids. Our community, when we can start opening up and doing rentals again, our community is going to appreciate we added bathrooms right off of the commons so individuals don't need to walk down full to the east or west side of the building to use restrooms. The other item that I wanted to visit about was homecoming. We had our full list of homecoming activities, starting with our dress-up days and our hallway decorating, and this year's theme was Let Us Hear You Roar, having to do with salad themes. So we had a Hidden Valley Ranch Day and a Caesar Salad Day and a Thousand Island Dressing Day. And we had fantastic participation. Coronation was moved back to the arena on Thursday night after the volleyball game. We had made the switch several years ago to Monday night at the auditorium, and to accommodate our current restrictions, we were back at the arena, and for the most part, the kids really enjoyed it, crowning our king, Jalen Corner, and our queen, Audrey Rubish. A significant change that we made to our Friday activities, normally the pep rally is held in the auditorium, followed by Battle of the Classes in the arena. This year we did them both outside, and went very, very well. Even though we were outside, we asked kids to wear masks because social distancing was tough with everybody in the stands. They responded very well. We had great participation in the games, and some unexpected things happened as well. As part of the program, because we were outside, the marching band performed their halftime show, and incredible appreciation from the student body, because unless they've gone to the football games or are part of the band, most of our kids had never seen the band and what they do at a halftime. They see the parade marching and things like that, but I didn't realize, because I was watching, enjoying the show, until one of the teachers nudged me and they said, "Mr. Radke, your student body isn't making a sound." They were into it. They really enjoyed getting to see their classmates perform something they had never seen before, as well as the cheer and dance routine. They had seen the dancing. We've done that in the auditorium before, but as soon as they started throwing the flyers in this routine, you could hear the oohs and the ahs from the kids, because, again, they had never seen this performance before. It was really, really enjoyable to get to see that. And the highlight of every class competition is we end with the tug of war, which is hundreds of kids pulling on this rope, and it is crazy and it is wild. Following that, we had our parade. Just a couple quick slides, because I know so many of you there, our Teachers of the Year, and finished with Burning of the H, our football game, and the band playing again at halftime. I'd like to end my good news by saying thank you. Starting the school year is always a challenge. This year you faced questions you'd never considered before. Information recommendations you relied on to make decisions changed daily, sometimes throughout the day. But with precautions in place, we started the school year in person. We're having our fall sports seasons. Our actors and musicians are preparing for their fall performances. Your teachers and students are happy to be back together. I ended with this slide because this has been my view of the parade for the last 5 years. I walk behind the student council float, which is the last float in the parade. I walk at the end to remind myself never to take for granted the opportunity and responsibility my hometown has given me to run a high school they can be proud of. So on behalf of your high school students, faculty, staff, and a very grateful high school principal, thank you for all you have done to keep us going and create a school district that we are very proud of.
Thank you, Mr. Radke. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, and we will move on. Our next one is an award from the Associated School Boards of South Dakota. I just realized as I was reading through this that the actual award, we were weaning calves today at home, and I barely made it to the meeting on time, and I forgot to grab the actual award, so I have grabbed one off the shelf that matches it. But Huron School District and our board won the Bronze All Award this year from the Associated School Boards, and what that is, the All Award is a board recognition program designed to recognize school boards for their dedicated and ethical service to the students of South Dakota. This program will recognize board members' participation in outside activities, board development and training, and demonstrated leadership at various areas and levels. And they've got 3 different levels to it. A stands for ACT. You basically go and attend functions that help with leadership and board development. Delegate assembly is one thing that we participate in. Legislative day, there's regional meetings, and typically this award would be given out at regional meetings, but with the COVID, they sent that directly to me to give to the board. The ASBSD annual convention, you can get points for going to that, and then legislative Cracker Barrels, we get points for going to those. Learn is one of the L's. They have different workshops that you can go to, gavel workshops, by having a LAN. Tim usually is our LAN, our Legislative Action Network member. There's different seminars and webinars that you can get in on, and all those add up points. And then LEAD is the last one. They have president's workshops. We get 50 points that I'm a board member on the ASBSD board, and then also officers get points, and our LAN member gets points, and there's points for delegate assembly. So all of that adds up, and the more active you are, the higher level you get. And this year we are a bronze level award winner. So congratulations, everybody. Thanks for all your service and being active and making us one of the better boards in the state, I feel. So I will bring the award next meeting, I promise. So moving into the next one is our business manager report. I'll turn it over to Mr. Christopherson for that.
So already, we're 25% of the way through the fiscal year. So in the general fund, we've already collected $5,624,000, which is 25% of budgeted revenue. Last year at this time, we'd collected $3,400,000, which was 16% of the budget. That's probably the biggest discrepancy we've ever had on one of these monthly reports, and it is due to the coronavirus relief fund that was released by the governor, the $75 million that was given out to the schools. The Huron School District received $1.2 million of it, which is 90% of our projected allocation. So that is in the revenue this month, and that's why things are now out of whack, and will probably remain that way the rest of the year. So far, we've expended $3,533,000, or 16% of the budget expenditures. Last year, we had spent $3,051,000, or 15% of that year's budget. We're still trying to bring the construction project to a close. We continue to monitor the project. We're still waiting on middle school lockers, which haven't been delivered from the manufacturer yet. The date keeps getting pushed back. We're working on getting good locks and keys for all doors. And we have some rooftop units that weren't working properly, but we think we've got to the bottom of that. We have some other upgrades that we'll do to those units that we're doing outside of the construction project, so that won't slow the closing down of this project up. But that is my report.
Does anyone have any questions? Mr. Wheeler?
On the general fund report, when we talked about the revenues out of whack because of the COVID funds we received, but the expenditures aren't yet out of whack, will those get similarly different?
They are a little bit skewed by what we have spent on our response to COVID-19. And that's in the expenditure report. I can grab that number for you. There are $259,000 that have been spent. So that expenditure number is inflated by $259,000 due to the coronavirus.
And do we have all school year to spend that money?
The coronavirus relief funds of $1.2 million are just general fund revenue at this point. There are no strings attached to that money. We don't have to track it. They assume we have already spent that money in response to COVID-19. So unless other things come up that we need to purchase in response to COVID-19, that money is just sitting there.
So things like operating school lunch throughout the school year last year when school wasn't in session, the free lunch program they were going out, giving out, that kind of backfilled that program and paying employees when we weren't.
No, the school lunch program's a different fund, so that one has its own set of issues.
Okay.
Extra things that were bought for food service, like hand sanitizers and shields and disinfectant, things like that, we did purchase for food service out of the general fund. But the food service fund stood alone as far as paying all those folks when they weren't at work. We took that out of the food service fund. But at that same time, we were operating the food distribution with the 3 trucks, and we were reimbursed for each one of those meals that we served.
Okay. Other questions?
I could just back up one more step and just bring the whole picture together.
Okay.
When this first started, we received the Esser Funding, which was the emergency funds for education. We were allocated $700,000 for that. That money was tracked specifically. You had to expend it on certain things, get reimbursed for it from the state. So yes, the first $700,000 that we received in response to COVID-19 was treated as a grant and on a reimbursement basis. Now, we've got the 1.2 million that's a coronavirus relief fund that didn't come with strings attached to it. So actually, we've received in the last 2 fiscal years, $2 million of relief funding so far.
Other comments? If not, thank you for your report. I will now turn it over to Mr. Nebelseck for his superintendent's report.
Well, the superintendent's portion of it will be fairly brief, and then a lot of it will be focused on the old business COVID update, so I appreciate the officers allowing me to have those 2 things next to each other. First of all, we're moving forward with a group of students who are leading the effort to have a appropriate memorial for Coach Tom Basler, who we lost last spring from a health episode, tragically. And so Michaela Hofer has been working with the family and then coordinating with other people, and they have a rock which will be now communicating with buildings and grounds. I've been out with Mr. Rodert, and we've seen an idea of where this will be put, but it'll be outside the running surface near the entrance where all the athletes come and go to the track complex, because Tom was the head track coach. It's got a beautiful memorial plaque that will go on it. The rock itself weighs about 2,000 pounds, and so we'll be coordinating. Michaela's doing all of the coordinating to get it delivered by equipment and put in place, and then once it's in place, they'll put the plaque on it, and then I hope to have them come once it's all in place with pictures, and we can appropriately honor Tom and what the kids are doing in his honor at a board meeting later. But I wanted to bring you up to date on that. The second thing that I would talk about, which I could have put in the COVID report, but I like to put it here. I think it's good for the community to know that we are starting into details of what all of our concerts will look like. So instead of the concerts being at each of the elementary schools or even at the auditorium, we are now putting together a master plan until we're past this COVID for all of the concerts to be moved to the arena. And so just to give you an idea, because we did this when we had the 400 that needed to come in for in-service, we're now working with all of the principals and then all of the directors so that the east balcony, which is the one with the superintendent business office behind it, that will serve as risers for the performances, from the bleachers at the bottom all the way to the top, because musicians have to be distanced in order to take off masks and be able to fully perform. And this will be, if it's small groups, it'll be down on the bleachers as a riser. If it's large groups, it can go all the way to the top. Parents will be, and grandparents, et cetera, will be invited in for the balconies, the west balcony and the north balcony. The reason why we want to do it in that way is so we do not have to several times dismantle score tables, score benches, all of those things. We'll have the audience up top, and the east side will be the performance. We're going to do some things unique to address the COVID issue. In the past, we've worked on fine arts protocol, that if you come to a concert, please stay for the whole concert, okay? We're doing exactly the opposite during protocol. We will have schedules of when students will perform, and we will make sure they don't perform before that time, so that parents can be assured that if I am in my seat at that time, I will get to see my child or grandchild perform. We will treat it like we do the other events. We will plead with people to consider wearing masks so that we can keep activities going, but we are not into, at this point, requiring masks as a condition to come in. The other thing that we will try to do as it spikes is not only ask for as much help as we can with the masks, but if groups are coming that live in the same household, sit tightly, because you're already close contact. Therefore, we can create more spaces for an audience by the families sitting tightly together, and then appropriate spacing as much as possible. Then we'll have breaks between each group so that people can hopefully mask, but get in and out and make it possible. This is really a follow-up to the film or the video that you saw from Mr. Radke with the various pictures. We want to ask people to help us as much as possible mask so that we can stay open, and from little ones all the way through high school, they do not lose their youth experience. And so I'm proud of the directors for starting to put this together and cooperate with us to have as much distancing as possible. And I want to thank the arena staff for working on that as well. The other thing I have on the superintendent's report is to use my report as a time to open it up for you folks to begin discussing the process of school board vacancy replacement, because it is a matter of public record that board member Wheeler is unopposed as a candidate for the South Dakota State Senate, and therefore that kicks in a set of protocols that take place after the election in order to work on candidacy and getting people up to speed, et cetera. So I'm going to yield to the vice chair and board members on discussing for the community what happens next.
Yeah, as you stated, Mr. Wheeler needs to get at least one vote in the upcoming election. I think with his family in town, he should probably do that. But yeah, I'd actually like to just turn it over to Dave, and maybe you could say what your plans are of the election and how things are going to play out there, and then we can kind of talk through what the board is going to do then and how we will go about filling a vacancy there.
So, my plan is that I would resign from the school board spot at the end of December, somewhere around there. Typically, we only have one board meeting in December, and so I'd definitely be there through that. And we can talk about timing, you know, if there was any need for some sort of special board meeting because of a COVID issue or something. I can stick around. I don't need to resign. The legislative session will begin January 14th, and so I could wait all up till then if I really needed to. And there's some question about whether I'm even legally required to, I think it's actually possible for someone to possibly have both jobs, but I don't want to do that. That'd be a disservice to both positions to try and do that at the same time. And so that's why my plan is to resign in December. There'll be the first meeting in January that someone could then take over. My term is up this year, and so because our terms begin in July with our elections in April, it'll be the last 6 months of my 3-year term here that'll need to be filled, and then it'll be up for election this April anyway. So my hope is that we can find a good candidate who wants to fill in the spot for 6 months, knowing that it's either a 6-month job and you're done, or you can take it for 6 months and you got to run and see, what happens in the election for the school board spot. And that's kind of up to the board to decide to pick. The law states clearly that in the case of a vacancy, the board picks the replacement, and it actually says that my resignation is not effective until we've picked that replacement.
That's correct.
And so I can't resign until we have picked that person. I could submit the resignation, which will trigger the process, but it won't be effective until we finally pick that person. And I think the law also requires that we pick a replacement on one meeting and then they take office the following meeting. And so if we're going to do it at a regular meeting, we'd have to probably pick that person at the meeting in December or hold a special meeting in December to fill that replacement. So that way that person can be ready to go in the first meeting in January.
December 14th is your only board meeting night.
December 14th?
I just looked it up for you.
Okay, thank you. So, how we want to do that would be kind of up to the board. Since we have in this particular time plenty of lead time, it opens up opportunities for us to discuss, ways to fill that position, make sure the public is aware of it, and so that way, if there are interested members of the public, they can come to us, come to the board members, and let us know.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Yeah, I guess I would ask the public that if there's those of you out there that are interested in possibly running for school board in the future, but also filling the vacancy, to reach out to any of the board members or superintendent or business manager and talk to us about the job and what it's like and how time consuming it is and what all is involved with that. So, any of us would be willing to discuss it, and please give us a shout. So,
And I think it would be good for us at some point, maybe at the next meeting, to kind of set a time frame. If we know we're going to try and pick a spot, a replacement by December 14th, maybe tell people, end of November, we got to know. And if we want to create a formal process where we have an application or submit a letter or something like that, we can do that. Or if we just make it informal, make people aware of it and say, let us know. We can either do any of that process. I'd also would tell anybody that really, you can definitely talk to us about the being on the board, but calling Mr. Nebelsick he's a great resource for anybody who's thinking about running or thinking about filling the vacancy. Mr. Nebelsick will always be happy to sit down with you and talk through what it means to be a board member and answer your questions about process and duties and time commitment. He's always very good about that. So
Thanks, Mr. Wheeler. I actually appreciate that you're going that direction. For the 10 years that I've served as superintendent, everyone who's ever been a candidate for the board, we've afforded them a couple of hours of all the information so that they would go into the forums and those things informed. So Mr. Christofferson and I have done that together for a decade. So if someone would like to go through that even before deciding if they're interested, they're very welcome to do it. We just walk through what it looks like for the board and how that all works, and we've done it many times.
Any other? If not, thank you, Mr. Wheeler, and we look forward to the process.
Okay,
You have any other items on your superintendent's report?
I'm ready for COVID.
All right. We will move into the first item of old business then, our COVID update. Mr. Novosek.
Okay, thank you. Just to give this wonderful community a picture of what happens, there are meetings on COVID that involve administrators or the school nurses several times a week. At least once a week, today at 4 o'clock, there is a meeting called Office Hours, in which at least one of our nurses, sometimes all of them, join me, and we listen to the Department of Education and the Department of Health come together with information for us on what's going on at the state level. The large school group meets on a Zoom at least every other week. The Huron area superintendents, which is all the small schools, public and private, and your superintendent meet on a Zoom at least monthly, but we're on call to go every week if we needed to. In addition to that, it all goes around what I've talked about many times, and that's the Operation Task Force. And the Operations Task Force are the ones that the school board, way back in July, agreed in the original plan would be the sounding board, the recommendation board for the superintendent. I would share with you that that decision, I think, has directly moved us to the success that we've had in keeping the schools open, because those people come from the test center, they come from law enforcement, they come from city government, county government, from the Department of Health, and they have been instrumental in keeping us going. We have seen times when we were one of the hot spots in the nation, and then a time when we set a record in our community with almost no cases for 6 or 7 weeks, and then we've seen 2 different spikes since then. And so with each one of those, there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes to keep the school community, if I can even borrow this word for a second, but to the best possible, immune from the spikes. We have not seen the spike in the school community when our county and our city have been going through it. And there are reasons for that. And the reasons are the 5 protocols which we use in order to determine that we are not having students or staff be in situations that would cause them to be close contacts in school. Our 5 protocols are hand washing and sanitizing. For instance, I watch constantly any keyboards, microphones, when there's not a mask, those have to be wiped down immediately. That's a protocol, okay? Second protocol is we mask in all situations possible, unless we've got where we can get outside and get mask breaks. Third, based on people that have toured our schools, I believe that Mr. Christofferson and Mr. Helbcat and their staffs have made us the most shielded interaction community there is, with the plexiglass shields, the plastic shields, the clear hanging shields all over the place. So that's the 3rd protocol. The 4th protocol is social distancing. And then the 5th protocol, which we added a few weeks ago, is timed interactions. So that if all of the first 4 protocols are in jeopardy at all, if we would be together more than 15 minutes in one setting, so we time all the interactions to keep people moving. We're within a week or so now of having our buses shielded in order for that, with our seating charts, to give our children the best chance. So when it comes to you have it electronically, and I have a hard copy here so I can write. If you have, what I did in preparation for this meeting is I went through your protocol book, which we first approved in July. It has 59 pages. In fairness, half of those pages are appendix to show information that people can refer to if they have questions about, where did this information come from, et cetera. And so the first 20-some pages are the actual actions. Anything that's highlighted in green, it has to do with me updating the document for your approval tonight with what we're actually doing. Because with the COVID task force working with us, the nurses working with us, it has evolved over time. So that is what is in the green, are those changes, like where I put hand washing, social distancing, and timed interactions. On page 4, the return to school procedures, and because we've had to add some things at the last minute, it's 4-5, but it's the beginning of the green there, okay? Those procedures are actually the procedures that we saw passed in Sioux Falls. They're the procedures that we saw come out of Nebraska and Iowa. We're encouraged by our state to move forward with different initiatives, whatever we can do to keep kids in school. Now, I'm going to come back to the part that's in blue and yellow. The other greens are the updates on what we've done with critical infrastructure workers, and then what we've done as far as symptoms and how we're handling that. Then we've updated the information on who serves on the different task forces. And then when you get to the pages that look like this, the multicolored columns, okay? The effort with the multicolored columns is to bring up to date everything that you were aware we were doing, but I wanted it to reflect on the document that the community can see. So those things are not a change in any of our protocol. One of the main things on the school closed side that I added was the fact that we'll try to go back to grab-and-go meals. The other thing that I put on the school closed column is this caveat, and this comes from schools all over the state. There are remote possibilities that we could wind up with students completely ready to go to school, but not a large enough staff available to keep school open, okay? And the concern there is that if we are only in the red because we are short-staffed, there is a real concern, does that stop then students from being in their activities? If we're only in the red, say in the high school because we're short-staffed, should that affect if we've got plenty of coaches for them to still be in it? If we're in red only in the elementary because we are run out of elementary teachers for 14 days, should we still be able to have a middle school concert? So that's why it now shows in your column that if we're in red because of an outbreak, that closes everything down. But if we are in red because of staffing, then the board has some options to hear the staffing report. We'd probably have to have a special meeting at the time to hear the staffing report and declare we are not in red lockdown protocol. We are distance learning because we've run out of staff. And so I tried to make sure that that's in each one of those columns as to what you would actually do in those situations. That's the main part of the changes until I get to the issue. And the issue is the part that's the one blue line and then in yellow, which I've spent 15 to 20 days on. And so I'll get there only after I've answered the questions on all of the green, which hopefully recognizes what you folks knew we were doing. We are one of the schools that each time we get a call, and by the way, yesterday on a day when we weren't open, I think there were 9 calls from either the Department of Health or the local testing center, in which then the administrators and their nurses had to react to texts from me, no matter where they were, in order to determine the protocols. And what I keep getting asked from the Department of Health is, do you have any close contacts? And I go through the 5 protocols. I check with our building principal, were those protocols honored? Yes, they were. No, we don't have close contacts. And what's really important there is that our 7 weeks of data show that we are not spreading the disease in school. The 5 protocols are working, and so therefore we're not sending healthy students home because they happen to be in a desk that had shields between us. Okay, so that gets us through all of that. I'll just pause in case you've got a question before I get to the issue at hand, and that's close contacts that occur outside the school system, which is what I spend by far the majority of my time on, connecting with our administrators and school nurses. So any questions on any of the rest of it?
Mr. Wheeler?
I had a patron talk to me this last weekend about the 15 minutes, and then kids getting up moving around. And he didn't understand why that was. He thought that was spreading the virus more. And so I thought it'd be good to have you talk a little more about that particular protocol and what the purpose of that is.
Very good. Where all it's humanly possible, 6 feet of social distancing, you can be there as long as you want. But the CDC research, supported by the Department of Health, says that if people have to be closer than 6 feet, even though we're masked, okay, the probability of the virus collecting enough of a mass in order to be spread to someone else accumulates over time in a certain given area. And so therefore, before that accumulation can exceed 15 minutes, we make sure that we're either back to the 6 feet or have moved so that there's not a load, is that the word, of the virus in any one spot. And for 7 weeks, that has worked. Because we have a case right now where we're trying to determine if a teacher possibly got it from a student. And that's yesterday's work. But until then, we have not found where we've had one catch it in school if people were masked. Ironically, we've had a couple of situations where people traveled together to go to required student interaction meetings with parents, whatever, were masked the whole way down, the whole way back. Someone was ill, they didn't realize it until they were on the trip, and for the next 14 days, that was not spread. Now, we've got some follow-up to that a week and a half later. We don't know if that's a new experience or not, but wherever we can, shields, masks, hand washing, distance, timing, if that was all we were doing, would not have credibility. But as the fifth armor plate, that's what we've tried to do. In fact, they really schooled us on the athletic and activity side to make sure you don't stay with one drill more than 14 minutes, so that you don't get to that concentrated area of the same people in the same area with the virus. Great question. I wish I didn't know as much about it. Okay.
Thank you.
I just have two comments. First one being, I've had a lot of questions on how do we keep having spikes in the community but not in the school, so I'm glad you touched on that a little bit. And then the second one is, anytime I talk to a district that is closed, the first question I ask is, were masks mandatory? And so far it's been no. And so I'm really proud that we started off that way and we're still open and we still haven't had any big issues as far as spread. I just want to commend you and the task force for bringing that recommendation to the board, and then us having the foresight to go along with it, because that's the first question I ask, and anytime schools are having issues, is are masks mandatory? And so far, like I said, it's been
Right.
no.
Mr. Wheeler?
I want to ask about contact tracing, and who does that in our school? How many personnel are dedicated to that? What kind of resources is that taking up from the school?
Okay. We are unique in South Dakota. Huron did it first. There was a recommitment to it a couple weeks ago, but through the county and city and their operations task force and their overall COVID task force, they're the ones that put together the testing center, and those testing people have evolved to be the primary contact tracers in our community. Vital beyond words, okay? So our people do not contact trace per se, they validate whether our protocols are in place. And they will assist the task force, or the call center, okay? They will assist them in making sure that we are able to communicate with whoever they're trying to get a hold of. And what I'd like the community to know, because it's really an amazing part of this, is that the Department of Health is just absolutely inundated right now because of the explosion of cases across the state and in our county. Many times, and they're the ones that are the primary responsible for contact tracing. Many times, the calls that I get from there notifying me that I have a positive and that we need to check contacts, many times those students or staff are in their final 2 or 3 days of quarantine because we acted on it immediately rather than waiting until we got the call from the Department of Health. So that group that are responsible for the testing center and the call center have morphed into adding to their duties contact tracing. And they get after it. And they have direct contact with the superintendent and all of those people. They'll call me to make sure that I received it. Then they're good enough because of the complexities to put it in a text. I hit confirm so they know I have it. Then I send that text to the building principal and the nurse, and they hit confirm that they have it so that we make sure we don't have anybody out there that tested positive and we didn't deal with it. And then I get a follow-up from the nurse that that person has gone home, et cetera, et cetera. I think it'd be good for the community to know that each building has strategically tried to find a holding place that does not contaminate others while we're waiting for a parent or someone to call when we get the call that they tested positive because of an interaction outside of school. The common things that are causing the spread just through what we see are large family gatherings, social gatherings centered on a service organization or a church, reunion type things, where a lot of people know each other and are close friends or close family members, but someone somehow had wound up. That's where most of the cases take off. When we learned, this is make sure I get all my notes here, when we learned that the percentage of our distance learners that have come up positive is higher than the percentage of school students who have been positive, that shows us that the people are in a community that does not have a day-to-day protocol, which is actually allowing that to happen more often. The governor's office called several schools. They try to work out, they're trying to find samples that they can use in other places. And so it meant a lot to me when a week ago they said, we have to hear what you're doing. Because to be in a county that's been as high as it is, and I believe we represent, when we're in session, 15% of the population of our county is inside our 5 buildings on a daily basis. And so when you have the community spread or the substantial spread that we've had, and it's not spreading within the buildings, then they want to know about the protocols. They want to know about the shields. They want to be able to have other people learn from each other. Just like we all learned from Harrisburg was the first one to openly state close contacts can stay in school if they're masked. We were actually there on a different angle. Ours was, because we're masked and have the shields, they're not close contacts. Both of those are working as long as the nurses update me daily on the data to show that kids are not getting it in school and staff is not getting it in school. I'm going to write a memo to the staff tonight or in the morning because of what I've learned today, that our staff is incredible at masking during the whole time they're with kids. But they resemble our community in their other functions, in church and in other gatherings, and that's how they're getting sick, and then I'm running out of staff members. I mean, we had, at one point, we were up to 18, which were either critical infrastructure workers, or they were on 14 days, or they tested positive, 10 of them at one point. So we got back down to, we were fully staffed, I believe, for 1 day last week, and then yesterday was something with different ones. Here's an example. A test center let me know that we had a group of teachers in a certain grade, that the one tested positive and the one said, well, I was in a room with 4 other teachers for our pod meeting, okay? and we didn't have masks on. So the superintendent's all uptight. How could that be? Well, then I did the research, and they followed our protocol. They were exactly what has happened tonight. They all came in masked. They sat in the far four corners of the room, took their mask off to communicate, put their mask back on and left. That is within our adult protocol, and so therefore then they had not been at risk. So now what I need to concentrate on is, can we get a higher level of protective masking when our 400 employees are in the community? But it's tough because I was in a long meeting this afternoon, and I said that I would be one of the message carriers to the community. No one wants to mandate anything in a community, and our kids have clearly, I know I'm repeating myself, but our kids have clearly learned that if they mask, they get to do all the things they've always wanted to do in high school. And if they don't mask, we're going to be back to distance learning. So our kids are leading us. And so as a longtime community member, I would just like to share that when I was visiting with city officials and county officials and health officials today, I think we're on the verge of trying to come up with a universal message, is there a way that we could get the community to see things through the eyes of the kids? That our community can do a lot of things if our community would volunteer to social distance, volunteer to mask as much as possible outside of their homes, because the research shows, and what our schools have done, is that does work to give you more opportunities to be open, to have businesses open, to be successful. So that part's really complicated, and I've really delayed the biggest question just about as long as you want me to. Any other questions before I get to the issue at hand? Okay.
I would have just one comment. We do list the operations section, and then we list everybody's names in that. I'm not saying that's not right, but if this is a document that we're using for the next 2-3 years, we're probably gonna have a lot of turnover in that. So
Yes.
maybe it'd make more sense just to list the titles of people that will be
That'd be
in
good.
there. And I'm not saying we have to do it tonight. but
No,
maybe the next
that's
time
a
we have
good
to start,
suggestion.
maybe the next time we have to
Well,
start
that's
changing
why there's
names.
some green, because I
Yeah.
was already
Yeah,
updating.
yeah. So
Okay.
it might make more sense just to list, hey, we've got 3
Yep.
county commissioners,
Very good.
Huron's mayors in there, and,
Yeah.
and then if we've got.
If you get consensus from the board members before approving, I'll make that
And I'm not
change.
saying that we have to do it, but it's just an idea.
So I would disagree with that. I think it's good for the community to know exactly who those people are. Because they may know, I know that individual, and may give them more confidence as to who are making these decisions, as opposed to a random county commissioner, they don't know who it is, or an emergency management person that they don't know who it is. I think having those names on there is helpful, so people know these are people in our community making these decisions, and are vital. And as Mr. Nemelsek said, our Beetle County is blessed to have the task force that we have have been doing so much work on this issue since it started. So I think it's okay if we update it as we need to. Hopefully, we're not using this for 2 or 3 years, but we don't know. But that's my thought, at least.
And I'm fine with that. That's the computer science in me, is that the less changes in a document, the better, because then you don't have to go and change things. So that's the only,
I've made your exact argument before on a separate policy, but
and I agree that when they see other people's names of people that they may know, then they can call them and ask them about things, and so that's good. Yep.
Okay. Since you brought up the names, the one thing I would say is that the operations section is used constantly. The medical safety audit, I really have that at the needs of the nurses. I don't call upon them, but if the nurses are wanting allies, then they've got access to those folks. You'll see that there's repetition between both groups. Okay. Now, in this page, that's a long page of green that talks about return to personnel and students and staff who are close contacts. We're all okay with everything and wearing masks and initial positive and all of that because it fits our protocol until it gets to the line that's in blue. And this is with a lot of school districts. And the line in blue, that's in their policy says students with close contacts occurring outside of school will continue to follow the Department of Health directives to quarantine. The medical community is very strongly there. The school community is not. Okay, so I want to walk through it. The reason the school community is struggling because of the concept of, especially after all the time they lost in school already, the concept of healthy students not being in school. And so the overall committee is not ready yet to go to what would have been the educator's proposal. And that would be that if you're named as a close contact outside of school, we start monitoring you constantly. We monitor you for temperatures. If there's a symptom, you're gone for 10 days because you were close contact plus symptom, that equals 10 days. So what the education community in your town would be ready to do would be in essence, making the students the same critical infrastructure workers as you did the staff, because that's worked now, but instead of 400, that's 2,800. The medical community is not ready to do that yet because of the substantial spike that's going on in the community, and they're worried about a fallback with all of the things that we've done so well. Okay, so after working on this for 3 weeks and wanting to come here with something we could agree to, I want to read the yellow to the community, which would be our compromise on the blue. All right? The yellow says, the process for allowing healthy children who have been named close contacts outside of the school system to remain in school will be piloted through a series of initiatives as the superintendent gains support from the operations task force. Initiatives currently under consideration, including studying data on the percent of close contacts who become ill after 5 days. Because right now it's 14 days, but there's already compelling data that in that 0 to 5 and then 6 to 10 is much higher concentration than in the final 4 days. So the task force has said, bring us that research, bring us the research on what the Council of School Attorneys said about the number of days, and they may give me permission to pilot that, okay? The second one we're looking at possibly piloting is, and I've already shared this, but they want data on the percentage of distance learners who are becoming COVID positive as compared to on-site learners. And the reason for that one is that we have a theory that when we have children that are outside of school without the masking and shielding protocols, there's a greater propensity for them to get the disease during that 14 days than if they were with us following the protocols. So we want to study that. The next thing we want to study is the possibility of allowing COVID-positive parents, those children who have COVID-positive parents, to return in 14 days rather than the 24. Because right now, the protocol says they're out the 10 days that their parents are ill, and then their 14 days starts. We've had a situation where we had one that was out 10, then their days started on about day 7 or 8. They got the symptoms. Now they've been out of school 31, 32 days, okay? And so we're trying to come up with, if they don't have symptoms, can we figure out a way to monitor symptoms and get them out of here because of all of the masking protocol? So the superintendent, this will be written in here, if I can get your approval, the superintendent will keep the school board apprised of the progress and the results of any change in protocol for each time that I get permission from them to pilot getting another group back in school. Here's a couple of extremely transparent issues that I worry about. I worry about parents who were already economically devastated last spring with their kids home, okay? Now having children home, so the parent is sick and they miss work, and then they have to miss work because they have no one to take care of their children. Or we have children that are close contacts because they got it from a different family member, not the parents, but the parents have to take off work, or we have the children home without any supervision. Those are mental health issues and safety issues that are as big as COVID itself. And then finally, at the high school level, We're coming into with state soccer this weekend. We made it through the soccer playoffs. We're coming up on cheer and dance. But the issue of having perfectly healthy children not allowed to compete in their junior, senior final varsity event because they've been named as a close contact. They have no symptoms. We've monitored, we've tested them, but we're going to tell 3 volleyball players, 3 cheer and dance participants, no, you can't go because you've been named as a close contact. And I believe it behooves us to figure out how to monitor symptoms on healthy kids over the course of time, rather than just whoever names them as a close contact, that's it, you're done. 14 days. We've had some kids that have been named because of different associations, close contacts twice, for 28 days out of school, and we're not sick 1 minute. We're not sick 1 minute. So it is complicated. So what I'm seeking by writing this is you giving me permission to continue to work at pilot alternatives that the medical community will support in order to see if our data holds up that they're not catching it in school. Hope I haven't forgotten anything on that. I'm going to talk about the state's testing program after I see if we can get an approval. Let me look at this. I did the protocols, the distance learning, the comments on anybody that would help us by masking in social settings, weddings, class reunions, those kind of gatherings. If people would choose to mask, it'd make a huge difference. We're looking at research for 5 days of heightened awareness. We're looking at healthy kids being quarantined, and does that assist or not in stopping community spread? That's it. Mr. Chairman, I've given you all I've got.
All right, do we have any comments, questions? I guess reading through this, basically the blue part would be, if we approve this as presented, the blue section will go away and it'll be replaced
That's
with
correct.
the yellow.
That's correct.
You mentioned briefly that we mask kids and that they get tested. And I want to ask a little bit about that testing, and if this goes into the next subject, let me know. But when a student is named as a close contact, are they automatically tested? Are they do they say go down to the if they don't have any symptoms, just go down and get a test done? Can they do that? Can we, if their close contact was 5 days ago and they have no symptoms, do we want a test done to say we know we don't have it now? Let's let you back in. I don't even know if that's possible, given the rules of the testing center in terms of what they generally require before testing. I thought I'd ask you about that and how COVID testing fits into that protocol.
Okay. That's number 2, but it's certainly tied together, so I'm gonna work on that, okay? The test center, people call and they advise them whether they should get tested or not. The test center warns us that having a student test and they're negative in the first 3 or 4 days is great news that they were not capable at that moment of spreading, but does not have a statistical significance as to whether they're going to be a spreader or going to get it once the incubation period is over. They find that the accuracy of the testing becomes incredibly higher of the probability once it gets to days 5, 6, or 7. And I'm the superintendent trying to pretend I know this, so this is my best understanding, but not necessarily medically worthy. I got family members that say, Dad, you shouldn't even move your lips on this. Okay, then, so that is a part of it. Then they came out last week, and we had a long hour-plus meeting today on the fact that the federal government is supplying the state government with tests that are designed to go to schools called rapid tests. I believe it's rapid tests, and then there's another name with it called Betrix or something like that. And so at first they said you're going to get 2 for every student, so we'd get 5,600 tests, okay? And then they said if you don't want them, you have to opt out, which by the way is by noon tomorrow. You have to opt out. The majority of the large school superintendents are not going to opt out. We're going to receive them. We're going to work with our community, see if we can use them. and then if not, send them back so that they can redistribute them. Well, already, 5 days into it, they've let us know that if we can get you half that many, it will be more possible. So now it's down to possibly 2,800. I said to them, could we receive the 2,800, could we receive our allotment and take them to the test center? Because the one thing I don't think our schools want, and I'm sure our parents don't want, is for us to start having sick kids come to school and contaminate the school grounds while they find out if they're ill. That's why the test center is out away from everyone, so they can not spread it while they do the work. Well, today, the answer was, and I haven't talked to the test center since I learned this, so they'll learn it tonight. Today, the answer was, no, but you can send those back, and we will try to make sure they go to the community they were intended for. But there's no guarantee that that will happen. So at this point, I'm going to take the tests, unless you guys advise me elsewise, and continue to seek permission at the state level to have our unique testing center take these and use them for the kids, so we're getting them off campus instead of the possibility of contamination of buildings and rooms while people bring sick kids to school to find out if they have COVID. And so that's really in the rough area. But I'm very open to one of the pilots, because I know of another AA school who is stating that if these tests come, they may very well use these tests to allow those senior musicians or senior athletes the day before their event to test, to make sure that we're not missing someone, and that might allow them to perform. Hope I answered your question, but that's where these tests that just came out arrive. I do know that in one part of the state, the medical community does not believe that these rapid tests have the validity to become a part of their laboratory testing. However, if it gave us an indicator with our test center, the nurses and I at least want to look into that, because those people then would have it and could contact trace, which is what our marvelous city council and our city commission and our county commissioners are working on right now.
Other comments? I guess I would just say that, obviously we don't want sick kids in school. That's what we're trying not to not have happen. But in the event that there are kids in school that would be sick, that's the reason we have masks, and that's the reason we have shields and all the other precautions that we have in place. So I'm definitely okay with, if you get support from the operations task force and the medical community on this, that makes sense to me, that close contacts can be handled how they see fit. So if they don't feel those kids are going to be positive, then it would make sense for them to continue with schooling. I know there's been a situation at my own house where my son got sick. It was during homecoming time. Like 5 of his friends were also sick, and we thought, oh yeah, maybe we didn't handle that right. Maybe they shouldn't have had homecoming festivities and done that. Turns out he was negative. He didn't have COVID, but during that time I questioned, how close was he to me? We don't wear masks at home, obviously. We use the same kitchen and bathroom and living areas, and I questioned, well, how safe should I be around my parents? How safe should I be? And some of those things, I think families, they gotta think about that and kind of handle that themselves. So, if a kid's at home and his parents are sick, they should know, how close were you? You think your child's going to be sick or not? And so I'm okay with the language of that, and if the operations task force is okay with.
Well, they know I'm not going to go forward with any pilot
Right.
without their support, but
Right.
they're more open to breaking it down
Yep.
to small experiments
Yep.
in order to move us forward. Mr. Chair, you motivated me into something that I think is critical for the community, okay? Adults are going to get sick and kids are going to get sick, And so we have to work as a community that cares about each other to make sure we don't have I'll nickname a leprosy effect, that somehow we look down on people because they wound up positive. It's going to happen. And so we work really, really hard to make sure people know that they're cared for, we'll get through this, we'll be okay. It's our pledge to agape love, because that is a worry. When the nurses and principals tell me about calling to let a student know that they've need to be tested or whatever, or that they've been identified as 14 days, there are major tears. There are major tears of isolation and what are my friends going to think, et cetera. So we just have to have a community that embraces each other and knows that that's going to be part of getting through this, so that people are whole emotionally and that we're just not clinically worried about what the test says. The nurses and the test medical people have reminded me, and I think we've been successful. All of our shielding, whatever, is to make sure a child does not take it home to a elderly person or a person with compromising health. And so anyway, I'm hoping in the next week that we can see a community that without any mandates says, you know what, we've proved it can work in those 5 buildings. Let's collectively pledge that for 6 weeks, we're going to mask up if we're not outside or in our homes, and just see if we can't help stem this, because right now it's a huge challenge for everybody.
Other comments, questions? If not, this plan is on the agenda for approval, so I would entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
I'll just say I appreciate the substantial amount of time that you put into this, and that with the task force, and always, I know that you're putting a lot of hours in to make sure that the school system remains open and we can continue to teach children. So thank you for that.
All right, any other comments? If not, we will vote, and I would ask Mr. Christopherson to please call roll.
Simmonsma,
Aye.
Lee, Wheeler,
All right.
Van Berkom,
Aye.
and Bischoff.
Aye.
Passed unanimously.
All right, our new plan is approved. We will now go to item 2 of our COVID update, the Department of Health testing program.
I incorporated that
Okay.
with, and I'll keep you folks informed as to how we try to tie that together.
Okay.
But right now, I'm just gently letting you know, we don't plan to use that to test inside the buildings. We've got a long ways to go before we'd be comfortable with that.
Sounds good. All right, we will move to new business. Item A of new business is a construction change order G-6 in the amount of $70,572.72. Mr. Christopherson, you got some comments on this change order?
Sure, I can go through what's incorporated into that $70,000. That $70,000 brings the contract total to $4,772,000. And the first thing in there is RFP 33, which is a credit, because we originally approved RF 33 to hook up some additional furnaces to building controls, and then it was determined that all of that work wasn't needed, so we got back $2,000. The biggest chunk of this RFP is number 40, which was the sidewalk work out front when they got into those sidewalks and determined that it was what we already knew, not adequate base under the sidewalks. Same thing we've ran into in the parking lots and under the tracks, so more excavation and more gravel and all of that. $45,861 to complete that work. 41, middle school new locker room shutoff valves. When they were doing the locker room updates, they couldn't get the water shut off in there because the valves were frozen, so we had to install new ones. $2,488. Door modifications, those are 3 doors in the middle school. The entrance door to the main entrance door to the reception area, the school resource officer office door, and a door in the locker room. $3,865. When installing the rooftop units on the high school, a failed gas regulator was found, so that was another $500. The new aluminum full glass door in the high school is a door to exit the backside of that conference room that Mr. Radke was showing you. That conference room on the front of the high school has 2 entrances and exits to it. When this RFP is completed, that's $5,100. A master clock needed to be moved from the high school to the middle school, $1,000. Hart and Cooley registers, that's registers in the high school bathroom project, $724. Roof flashing, that's roof work on the high school that wasn't included in the original bid, $2,266. The middle school provide new closer, that's a door closer that was failed on one of the main entrance doors at the middle school. Those doors weren't replaced, they were reused, so that was a repair of $594. Keys in the high school offices, $237. A new door hardware in the high school counselor area, $1,536. That door, once it was installed per the building plans, wasn't what we had envisioned on how that would work. That's the door between the high school commons and the counselor's area. So that was corrected at a cost of $1,500. The project didn't have blinds in all the areas in the middle school office complex. That's for more blinds, $3,528. And the last one, provide D-luminaries. That is lights in all the plumbing chases in the high school. They left us with plumbing chases where you had to bring in portable lighting if you were ever going to go back in there and work. And to bring it up to more of the district standard, we had the lighting put in there and put on switches. That's the breakdown of that RFP.
Thank you, Mr. Christopherson. Do we have any questions?
What was the issue with the sidewalk, and how much sidewalk are we talking about at the high school?
Well, the sidewalk on the east side of the looking at the front of the high school, the sidewalk that runs in front of the high school goes all the way and curves around down to 18th Street on the east. So begin there, go all the way in front of the high school, all the way to the west parking lot. That's the main stretch. And then all the cement, some of the other additional cement work all around that entrance. Obviously, most of that was in the contract to do the concrete work. This is all the sub-base work where they had to dig out 18 to 24 inches under all of that because it was just muck and they couldn't do their work without over-excavating and replacing.
Which comes back to the age-old story of the now quite elderly gentleman that talk about duck hunting, where the high school now exists. So when I first came here, and some of them have run out of gas now, but they would fondly tell me that they used to duck hunt right where the high school was, and we find that every time we put a parking lot in or a sidewalk in, is that it sits on what was a bog.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I would be looking for a motion to approve change order G-6.
Second?
A motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, we will vote, and I would ask Mr. Christopherson to please call roll.
Simmonsma.
Aye.
Lee. Wheeler.
Aye.
Van Berkom.
Aye.
And Bischoff.
Aye.
Approved unanimously.
All right, construction change order G-6 is approved. Our next item of new business is trust and agency account for the Educator Rising Group. And I believe Mr. Radke is going to speak to this.
I am here to ask for the creation of a new trust and agency account for a student group called Educators Rising. Educators Rising is similar to what FFA is for the ag community and FBLA is for the business community. Educators Rising is to prepare students who want to go into education or the teaching field. I'll serve as the advisor, and our fundraising is done through donations by the teachers. In order to wear jeans on Fridays for our Spirit Day when we wear our tiger gear, the teachers pay $1 to wear jeans on Friday. So that's where our funding will come from. And the goal of the group is to create the next generation of teachers through various activities. The first activity we did, we had 10 students attend a virtual conference, the 2020 Fall Learning Expo, hosted by SDSU. They got to listen to the chairperson of the education committee, VJ Smith, who's a very famous motivational speaker. He presented, and then the afternoon they had breakout sessions with different teachers, some professors at SDSU, some teachers of the year, including Mrs. Boomsma was one of the presenters. That was on our early release day, so we were done at 1:25, and the program went till 2:20, and 6 of the 10 stayed throughout the whole thing, and they found it really interesting. So hoping that starting with a small group of 10, and we'll build out based on the activities that appeal to them. You know, they may go into classrooms. Some of them are already doing teachers' aids within our building. I'd like to include this, or encourage this group to start doing teachers' aid in other buildings where they can actually take an active teaching role. But we're kind of on the ground floor and getting started. Harrisburg has a pretty strong program. They were one of the first to start 3 years ago. So hopefully we'll grow just like FFA and FBLA have a stronghold with our students. Educators Rising will be the next group that takes our students and gets them prepared for the next thing in their life.
Any board member have any questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
SEU is the FFA and FBLA. I can just share with you that, I don't know, what do you call my high school career now, 3 generations away or 4 generations away, but at that time period, there was huge involvement in Future Teachers of America all over, and then that really fell away, and there has not been an advocacy to go into the profession. And so to see teachers wanting to reinvest with themselves in order to promote the next generation is really exciting, and for Mike to personally take it on as the supervisor, the sponsor, he did not need another thing on his plate, but I think it also says this matters. And so I'm just really excited from my chair about this.
Well, it certainly sounds like we're creating more opportunities for students in our district, and I think that's great. So, sounds like a good idea. With that, we probably need a motion to approve.
So moved.
A motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we will vote. I would ask Mr. Christopherson to please call roll.
Simmonsma.
Aye.
Lee. Wheeler.
Aye.
Van Berkom.
Aye.
And Bischoff.
Aye.
Unanimous vote.
All right, the trust and agency account is approved. We will now move to our last item, and that is adjournment. Seeking a motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second. I would ask Mr. Christopherson, please call roll.
Simmonsma.
Aye.
Lee. Wheeler.
Aye.
Van Berkom.
Aye.
Bischoff.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
All right, we are adjourned.